Yeah, I also teach into the Masters of Education and Learning and Leadership with Amanda, and currently teach a subject called Leading Innovative Practices that gets students leading their own innovative initiative in their workplace, studies, or community, which is really interesting right now. So yeah, I've, as mentioned, I've worked in a bunch of different fields. So I have a lot of experience developing innovation, experience design and entrepreneurship programs. And I also run my own startup, helping people to own their professional development. And yeah, but I've also been a social researcher and still am a social researcher, work in workforce development. And yeah, I worked with the Gillard government on its telework initiative, particularly to improve workforce participation and inclusion. So again, which is another kind of very interesting for me right now, and seeing kind of this thing that people are calling, you know, working from home, which really wasn't, you know, what we kind of envisaged, because it's not. It's actually working remotely under a crisis. So I guess I'll be taking this probably from a designer, a designer's perspective, combined with, I guess, a social researcher sprinkled in. And so, yeah, I think, you know, the speed of change in the past, like, it's incredible to believe it's actually only 6 weeks ago that, you know, that so many of these restrictions came in place. It feels like almost years. And so, yeah, it's been dizzying, and it's just like, it's like innovation got like a jetpack. And so what normally would take years and even decades is taking days and weeks. And so, for example, we've been talking about the need for telehealth, and there've been these little initiatives here and there for years. And then suddenly, like, with fully just like the stroke of a pen and a press conference, it became reality almost overnight. But I think the thing to remember is that even though we keep talking about how we're all in this together, in that we're all connected and affected by each other's actions, the truth is that we're all experiencing this differently. So a couple of examples. So I was reading actually just in the past week how some academic journals were actually reporting a reduction of up to 50% in papers submitted by women during this period. While one editor who was interviewed actually noted that submissions by men for their particular journal were up by 50%. And, you know, this reflects these kind of really different stories that I'm hearing and experiencing myself. It's just like, you know, for some people, they're like, oh, you know, this is like a sabbatical. I'm getting so much more done in this time because I don't have unnecessary meetings and I'm not doing my commute. Whereas for others, it's like all this extra work is being created. And it's just like, yeah, it's just not, it's not the same. And so, you know, I think another statistic that popped up recently that I was really struck by was that 64% of those working in North Sydney are likely to have roles that can be done from home. On the other hand, 35% for workers in Sydney Southwest are in the same position. And so we're not experiencing this all equally. So just see if there's a chat. Okay, so Michelle was saying that it's worth being conscious of how different the current times are playing out for different people and groups. Absolutely, like it's so important, but it's so easy to forget. And so inclusive design is more important than ever. We often use this term co-design or co-creation, where you design innovations with people who are going to be using them, is really, really critical to those changes being inclusive. But in my experience with both teaching and in practice, what is often labeled co-design isn't enough. It's good, but it isn't enough. And so what we need is explicitly co-led design. And so what do I mean by co-led design? And what are the differences with co-design? So looking at co-design, and so co-design really, you know, it's very much about understanding what users want and need. And so it can involve things like, it's very, very important to get user consultation and feedback. And this can often, you know, be in the form of interviews and surveys and polls and workshops, and getting their feedback and testing on ideas that come out through this process. But I want to compare that with leading with co-leading. and supporting people to lead themselves. And so part of this is really important to recognize that there are these power differences, and being able to value and see people's experiences and expertise. And so this can be one of the dangers with co-design, is that sometimes not everyone gets seen, or people get treated differently, especially if they aren't as cooperative, which can often happen in this process. And so we end up working with the people who are more cooperative, or we end up, you know, I think what's kind of really interesting in this period of time is just how much the technological you know, interfaces has created these kind of immediate barriers. So people who, like, it's thinking to our classes, because we suddenly had to move online with, you know, so little notice. I literally had about an evening to move my class online from when we made the decision to do that. And yeah, it's just like, for some people, you know, it's actually more convenient. For some people, it's actually the difference from being able to access a class to not being able to access a class, to actually have a class online. But for others, you know, you know, we're really seeing the difference in people's internet access and quality. And yeah, it's just like, suddenly just like put this extra barrier on. And that can make a difference when you're actually seeking to co-design, when you're actually seeking to go out and get those contributions. That if you aren't really explicit about making sure that you see everybody, you know, you can get those contributions, but they may not be from everyone, and that has a bias in itself. And so really, at the key of leading with is supporting people's agency and ownership to lead and own their active participation in all stages and decisions. And I think that's really key, because it's I think, you know, what I've seen in practice of co-design is it can sometimes be, there's kind of these little parts where it's like, okay, it's now time for you to participate. And they can be very active, but then the decision making gets done somewhere else with, you know, a few people up here. And so I just want to say that while code-led is a label that I've developed, it isn't a new concept. So for example, these principles underpin community-based participatory action research for social researchers, also dealing with the same problem. It's just like social researchers would go into community and kind of research on people. And I think that happens a lot in practice with design. You can kind of design on people rather than actually really doing the, you know, fully owning that project with them. And so this is not to undermine co-design. When done well, it's really valuable, and it's not mutually exclusive. So this is why I have illustrated this with a Venn diagram that actually overlaps, because actually in good co-design actually does have, you know, does also co-lead. It does share that ownership. It does actually share that agency and support and encourage that agency. And so what I think, you know, why I like to use the term co-led is really just as a reminder that our most important role as designers is in supporting workplace innovation, is facilitating the agency and ownership of everyone actually affected by it, everyone who's part of that space. And so, yeah, I think it's often easier said than done, but it won't happen if that's not explicitly what we value and what we aim for. So yeah, if the idea, I guess, of kind of co-led design or some of the sort of issues that come out from the lack of it interests you, please feel free to, you know, get in contact, my email or LinkedIn. Or, yeah, anyway, so I think I have to stop sharing now. Okay, so I'm done. That was quite quick, I think. Was I quicker?